Welcome back to another episode of Press Play. I'm your host, Jeromee Scot. This is Season 2, Episode 2, and today we're going to be talking about some of the common mistakes I see PR or media relations experts making when they're trying to pitch a story to a journalist or a media outlet. Whether you're overhyping the pitch or you're failing to point out the local angle, I'm going to share some real-world examples from my 20-plus years in broadcast news to give you actionable strategies to avoid those mistakes. We're going to have all that and more coming up on this episode of Press Play.
Are you a small business owner facing bad reviews, social media backlash, or negative press? Don't let negative publicity define your brand. Crisis management: How small businesses can handle negative publicity is your step-by-step guide to protecting your reputation and bouncing back stronger than ever. Authored by Emmy-winning journalist Jeromee Scot, this ebook offers expert strategies for creating a crisis plan, handling media inquiries, and rebuilding trust with your customers. Plus, you'll get exclusive bonus downloads, including crisis communication plans and social media response guides you can use right away. Download your copy instantly at the Scot Media Tulsa digital bookstore at scotmediatulsa.com. That's Scot with one T. scotmediatulsa.com. Take control of your business's reputation today.
Well, welcome back to Press Play with Jeromee Scot. I'm so glad that you're here for today's episode. And I just got a notification that this podcast has been downloaded 250 times around the world. So thank you to everyone for your support. If you're a returning listener, I really appreciate your continued support. And if you're new to the show, welcome. I'm an Emmy award-winning journalist with over 2 decades of experience in broadcast news. I've worked in corporate communications and the nonprofit world. This podcast is where I share actionable advice to help you elevate your PR, digital marketing, and media strategies. So today we're talking about the common mistakes PR professionals make when they're pitching stories to journalists or to news stations. And trust me, I've seen a lot of them over the years. That's actually what inspired today's episode. I received a media pitch that fell flat, and it kind of inspired me to come up with the list of some of the common mistakes to share and talk about those and help you improve your strategy. There are so many ways that a media pitch can go wrong, so we're going to break them down one by one, and then more importantly, talk about how you can get it right. So let's kick things off with a mistake that I saw recently, which is actually what inspired me to do this podcast episode. I saw someone pitch a story to a media outlet by first talking about how it had been already covered by a competing station. So you get kind of think about the logic of that. So the PR professional probably thought, if another station had picked up the story, it must be good and someone else would want it. But there is a problem with that, which is that other competing stations usually won't touch it. Most newsrooms or journalists don't want to look like they're copying their competitors or following up on a story. That's just how the media industry works. And so when I saw that email come in as like, hey, this is a great story, your competitor covered it, are you ready to do it too? Obviously, that PR person hadn't ever worked in the industry and doesn't know how it works. So instead, I would have encouraged them to highlight what makes the story unique for this pitch. So are they pitching a new angle or a different update that the competing station had already done? If you frame it in a way that makes it exclusive to the station that you're pitching to, it's probably more likely to get picked up, or at least offer them a different interview or a different angle or a different event, something that can maybe help you get your message out, but in a different way. Another mistake I see a lot is when someone overhypes a story. Usually we'll get those pitches from viewers. These are not professionals. These are amateurs who have seen something on social media or think that they know of a really great story, and they will email it in and overhype it. Talk about how great it is, how wonderful this person is. This is going to be your top clicked video online. You're going to win an award for this. Usually we can see right through that, especially if it's an amateur, but I've also seen it with PR pros. These are people who don't take no for an answer, which is not a good thing when you're pitching, because you'll very quickly be blacklisted or labeled as someone who oversells but underdelivers. The truth is, if your story doesn't live up to the hype that you have promised, then it damages your credibility. So instead of exaggerating, I would recommend that instead you focus on what makes the story genuine or compelling. So offer facts, data, or real-world examples. Don't go into hyperbole. Don't use a lot of fluffy adjectives. Journalists are trained to see right through that. They'll usually just move on because it's not worth their time. The third mistake I see a lot is pitching without knowing the audience for the outlet that you're trying to get coverage from. So, for example, if you are pitching to a lifestyle reporter, but you have a business story idea, that's a big mistake, and I've seen that a lot. If the reporter that you're pitching to typically covers education, but you have a story about the economy, you either have to tie it into education or know that you're pitching to the wrong person. If you're trying to get a performance from a band on a morning show, that's a great target, but sometimes I'll see that same person pitch the same thing to a 10 p.m. producer. The 10 p.m. newscast doesn't have time for that. It's a 30-minute newscast. So just kind of knowing what the format is, and more importantly, the audience, is going to make a big difference. So do your homework, look at the kinds of stories that the outlet or a journalist typically covers, and then refine your pitch that aligns with that focus. Taking that extra step to make it personal and targeting a specific journalist is going to make a huge difference. A huge mistake I see all the time is when I get a media pitch where the PR professional has made the pitch about the client and not about the audience. An example would be that a local business that does lawn care, for example, just won a big award. And the pitch would be, hey, we'd love to come on or get some story coverage about this award and why it's such a big deal for our company. As a journalist, we're not in the business of free advertising. So if your pitch feels self-serving or over-promotional, it's probably going to get deleted. So the fix for that would be to frame the story around the value to the audience instead. So instead of pitching about the award that they won, talk about how the service that lawn care provides is making a difference in the community, and they just happen to be recognized for that. A lot of times people will just pitch what the client wants. So if you're working with the lawn care company, the CEO may think it's a huge deal that he just got this award and wants the news out there, but it's your job to go back and say, congratulations on the award. Nobody but you cares about that. So how can we pitch your story in a way that will get your business or your mission or whatever it may be coverage that's beneficial to the audience? That's not free advertising. If you want to promote the award that the company got, that's great. Buy an ad or produce your own spot that can go on social media or your website. Then maybe someone will care, but journalists won't. The fifth mistake I see all the time is a case of two extremes. Either you provide too little information or you provide too much information. You want to find the happy medium. We'll get pitches all the time where someone is sending maybe a sentence or two, and then we have to take the time to Google what the topic is, who this person is that you're trying to get me to interview, what really is the story, where is this brand located. There's way too much work. On the flip side, I'll see some PR people who go to the extreme and provide so much information, the actual story gets lost. I don't need to know when this business was founded, what the backstory is from the CEO that's not there anymore. I don't need to know how many employees and what their specialties are. I only need the basic facts, the basic who, what, when, where, why, and how. Any PR person should know all that. If you don't, you should start working on it. That's what a journalist wants to know. Format it in a way that's easy to understand, easy to read. I don't need to waste my time looking over something, and you don't need to waste your time putting all that in there. But at the same time, I shouldn't have to do your work for you before I even decide if I'm going to pick up your story. So make it something that's easy to understand, has some information, but is quick and to the point. The sixth mistake is following up too soon or too often. Journalists are super busy. So following up within an hour of your pitch or bombarding them with multiple emails makes you look a little bit desperate, and we're more likely to stop responding to you at all because we're sick of your emails. So I would say give it 3 to 5 business days before following up, which requires planning on your part. If you want a journalist to come to your ribbon cutting or the grand opening of something, you can't pitch it for the first time that morning and then follow up multiple times because you forgot to pitch 2 weeks ago. So pitch it way in advance, keep it polite and concise. If you do a follow-up, just a quick, hey, just checking in to see if you had any questions about it. I wanted to make sure you received my email. We're trying to put a guest list together. I know that breaking news could happen. We totally get that, but we just kind of want to get a head count because we want to make sure we have enough refreshments. Something like that will make a big difference. But if you keep texting, if you keep emailing, we're going to get annoyed very quickly. Sometimes I can usually tell when a PR person's getting some pressure from their client. Hey, we really want to make sure everyone's there. What are you doing to make sure that we're going to get media there? That's not my problem. I get it. I feel bad for you, but that's not our issue. And don't keep following up because it's going to damage your reputation and your relationship with us in the future. Mistake number 8 is all about bad timing. Timing is everything in PR, and it's also everything in media. So if you're pitching a non-urgent story on a breaking news day, that's not a great idea. Obviously, we've seen a lot of breaking news on the national level recently with the wildfires, blizzards. We've got Trump's inauguration coming up next week. So there's a lot going on right now. So just take that into consideration. Do some research, know the outlet's news cycle, and then plan your pitch accordingly. It's also really, really important to be tuned in with your local media so you know if there's a big story that's happening. If there's a big trial, if there's a big breaking news event in town, don't pitch something that doesn't align with that story or that coverage, because you're going to get deleted right away. And sometimes you don't have the option, but if you do have the option to pitch a story on a different day because of breaking news, I highly recommend you do that. Sometimes you've gone through all the trouble of having multiple people come in from out of state or out of town for an event. You don't have a lot of flexibility with that. But if you're thinking, I'm going to pitch a story on a Monday about my nonprofit's new fundraising gala that's coming up, but then on Monday morning, there's a huge breaking news event, a mass shooting in town, businesses that are on fire, maybe the mayor or governor or something is getting arrested for something. There could be any number of big stories that would totally overshadow your pitch. Go ahead and wait. Push that back and say, we're going to have to wait and do this on Tuesday or Wednesday or even next week, because we want that main big story to die down, because journalists are going to be so focused on that they're not going to care at all about our nonprofit. Another big mistake is being unresponsive, and I see this a lot. So let's say you pitch something on a Monday morning and a journalist is interested in your story. They email you back and it's been hours and hours because you've been in a meeting. You pitched it right before a big board meeting and you can't check your email. And before you know it, it's lunchtime and you check your email finally and you have 3 emails from a journalist who says, I'm interested in this story. Chances are they're going to move on to something else because they have a deadline and you've missed your opportunity. Always be available. If you're going to pitch something in the morning, make sure that you're by your phone or by your email and you don't have anything else that is more important, because they're going to need to get a hold of you. And if you don't answer, they're going to move on. I've also seen people pitch a story and offer an interview with someone who's out of town. Why would you do that? Don't offer someone who isn't available right away. Television news, even print journalists, digital media, everything moves really fast. If you pitch something that a journalist wants to cover, they're going to want to cover it pretty quickly. So don't offer something that you can't actually be done for weeks in the future. And then my final mistake that I see a lot is when PR people try to control the narrative. If you are securing or you have secured earned media, you do not control the narrative. The journalist does. Sometimes they get it wrong, and that's just how it goes. What you do afterwards is follow up and say, hey, I noticed this line was incorrect. Is there any way you could change that? Could you issue a correction? I know it's frustrating, but you do not control the narrative. Journalists value their independence. So if you try to dictate how they write their story, or if you demand certain stats be included, it's really going to backfire. I've also seen PR people who are on site with a journalist during an interview of someone else, like their client, which is totally, they should do. I highly recommend PR people be there in case a journalist needs something or there are questions, but don't be overbearing and try to take control of the narrative. Let the journalists ask the questions they want to ask. If they get something wrong, you can maybe clarify off camera or advise your client to respond in a different way, but don't be pushy. Don't try to make sure that they are shooting what you want them to shoot exclusively. Don't press the journalist over and over and over again to make sure that they include a certain stat or a certain statement. It's totally going to depend on the story that they write. That may completely be irrelevant depending on what they're trying to cover. So know your place, and it's going to go a long way. That'll do it for today's episode. Remember that pitching to journalists is tough, but by avoiding those common mistakes and focusing on some real value, you can really build stronger relationships with the media and increase your chances of your story getting picked up. If you found today's episode helpful, I'd love for you to share it with a friend or a colleague. And don't forget to subscribe to Press Play with Jeromee Scot so you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep crafting those pitches, stay authentic, and as always, press play on your PR potential.